Okay, if you're dealing with a leak from a Fisher Paykel washing machine, there's a few things it can be. Now, we're going to have to distinguish, is it leaking all the time, even when the machine's off, or is it leaking only when the machine's on? Now, if it's leaking all the time, even when the machine's off, there's really only one thing it's going to be, and it's going to be your taps, or it's going to be your connectors on the back of the machine or at the taps. So sometimes they can, if they've not been put on tight enough, they can loosen off a bit and they'll leak. So if it's leaking all the time, taps. One thing to keep in mind when you're trying to work out if the washing machine's leaking all the time or just when in use is that when you've finished a cycle, the washing machine isn't completely empty of water. There's water, and I'll show you, this machine is empty and hasn't been used in a day. And we're going to see that it still has water in it. So you'll think that, oh yeah, the machine's still leaking after it's finished, but it isn't. Like it can just present as a as it being the hoses. This is the only other way you can have it leaking. So if you're leaking down towards the bottom of the machine, like, so this points more towards there's a leak from here, or with this pipe, or there's something going on down really low in the machine that's got a very slow leak. Alright, so that doesn't want to cooperate. Let's pop that. Alright, so you see the water's coming out? Yeah, see my little puddle? Machine's not even on. But, so if you're getting like a leak that happens like after you've used the machine, but it's not a huge leak. So like it happens while you're using the machine, and then for a little while after, it's going to be something low down in the machine. But you can't let this trick you and think that, oh, it's coming from the hoses because it's leaking. Even when I'm not using the machine, it's leaking. That's not necessarily true. So next thing, if you, and this is only small leaks as well, right? So in here, your soap dispenser, just here, this is the overflow. Now if you put too much detergent in here, especially powder, or here, but particularly here, it can back up and overflow out through there, and then it comes down and out here. So, and I'd say, when I say out here, usually it's going to be there. You want to be a bit careful about using water on the floor as a diagnosis thing. Like, it's, you can use it, it's informative, but you take it with a grain. I would say take it with more than a grain of salt, because like if the situation's right, the water like somehow ends up there, and then like and let's say the washing machine's on an angle going that way ever so slightly, the water might travel underneath and then drip down there. So I also know this floor's on an angle, so the reality of this one, probably water that was leaking out this side is going to present over here. Okay, so now the next, so we've covered off the detergent. The next thing we want to cover is dirty seal. So if it gets too dirty here, and particularly if you get a lot of grime build up under here, and you can see this is pretty disgusting in there, you can get a toothbrush from that side and clean it, but that's not going to cause a problem. So when you get a lot of dirt right as you push up on this, in this particular area, especially on the rinse cycle, so for most of the cycle the water level stays under this kind of here, but when it comes to rinse it's up about here, and that's when it's going to leak when it's dirty. So dirt, hair, crap here. So you close that door, it doesn't quite seal properly, you'll get a drip down there. So, and that can form a little puddle, that can be quite a significant leak when you get it. So you just want to take like this one's pretty clean, toothbrush really gets in very well into there. But mostly cleaning, this is the seal bit that you're dealing with. That has to be clean, and you want it nice and clean on that. So really just a cloth, give it a good scrub. You can use a I forgot the kind of abrasive. I wouldn't use steel wool, you probably could, but the green kind of like, give that a scrub and just clean that with like a rag. I wouldn't use anything abrasive on that. Other than if you wanted to, you could use Jif. Okay, so we've covered off leaking here. The other thing we've got, so you can have a fault, and I can't tell you exactly why it happens. It's always a cold water valve, and what it does, it fills this too much towards it. So at the fabric softener time, it puts too much water in here, and then it comes up, and then that makes it spill out, and you'll often see, and this is a good reason, this is a good, not reason, good example. So it'll spill out and it'll leave this water marking. So now this one is kind of the exception that proves the rule, because it's got, and this one has actually no leak. This is my personal washer at home. But you'll get like this staining here. So this is actually fabric softener staining from a careless person, and it's all over my wall as well. They just haven't been careful and it's just gooped out. So, and you can see it all there as well. So you want to be a bit careful, like when you're looking for these watermarks, that you're not going, oh yeah, there's your watermarks. Definitely that proves, like, you want to see the leak. This is only informative. So if I saw this, I'd be like, right, I'm looking maybe for, this is going to be the water valve issue. And what it often will do, if especially the washing machine's sitting a little bit, like that's pretty exaggerated, but if it's like that, then what happens is this comes down like this, it goes into here, it comes around and then drops down like that. So it can present a little bit like the water leak from that not being clean. So, and often, so when this isn't clean, sorry, we're just going to circle back a little bit. When this is dirty, you'll often get this stain, like it'll only be one singular kind of drop mark, right, kind of there at the bottom. And this one you can see has like all of this, and it's all there, which is more indicative of that, this having a faulty water valve. So if you're getting that, it happens on the wash smarts. If you put it on a super quick, it happens, I think, at about the 7 or 8 minute mark. All of you just see, and here's the kicker, it can be intermittent. It's a difficult fault sometimes, but if you catch it around the 7 or 8 minute mark, water comes down there, and sometimes it's pouring out, sometimes it's just a little bit. If you've got a what do you call it, a quick smart, the quick smart, same washing machine as the wash smart, it just doesn't spin as fast, has a bunch less cycles. You'll only have the quick 30 option. Put it on quick 30, empty, and you'll have to watch it, but you probably watch it after about 15 minutes down to, say, 5 minutes. And then during that time, that's when it's going to fill that fabric softener to push the fabric softener out, and that's when it will overflow, if it's going to. But you kind of can't, like, if you catch it in the act, great, you've caught it in the act. But if you don't catch it in the act, you can't be like, oh, that's all good, because often it is an intermittent fault. Usually it gets worse and worse with time. It doesn't usually get worse and worse in severity, it gets worse and worse in frequency. Okay, so now that we've covered off all of the leaking options, I'll move on to the flooding options. Sorry, one more leaking option. So you've got here, you can open this, take a butter knife. So, and this typically isn't going to start leaking by itself, but if you've taken this out, so you unscrew it, and then you put it back in, if the seal gets pinched or anything, you'll see like it can leak from here, and it'll drip out. You'll see water around it. You see how this is perfectly dry? And there are other small leak things that can happen, like sometimes this little tube, so this little tube is kinked deliberately behind here. So when you want to drain the water out of the washing machine for whatever reason, you pull that down, you pull it out to pull that kink out. But that kink also, if you ever kinked a hose multiple times, it forms a weak point, and sometimes you get like a pinhole in that. So sometimes you're going to have, like, and I can't cover off every single leak, slow leak. This is the main the big reasons that it leaks. This, like that, I've not seen that many times in my life. I know it exists. I've seen it. I've dealt with it maybe 5 or 10 times. But for you, you're trying to deal with your washing machine at home. 95% of the time, what I've just described for a slow leak is going to be it. The water valve is the main fault that causes a slow leak. If there's a fault, usually it's a dirty seal or you've put too much washing powder in or detergent and it's overflowed. Okay, let's move on to the big legs flooding. Really, the only way you're going to get floods is something like you haven't installed that at all and it just floods all out. You can also get a hole in the drum. Now that's comparatively rare. Not a hole in the drum, like a hole in the basket. So you got your drum here that sits in a plastic basket. If a coin or a bolt or something gets in between the drum and the basket and it flies out at high speed, it can go through the basket at high speed and punches a hole through it. If it punches a hole at the top, it usually doesn't cause much issue. Like if you get a hole kind of at this level, it's going to maybe, like that's going to come in. Again, this is one of those rare issues. You're going to be like, it's a slow leak. It'll appear as a slow leak. There's a tiny bit of water splashes out. If the hole is down here, it's just going to keep emptying. And that's going to be a flood situation. The other way you can get a flood, and more commonly, is if you put something like detergent in, and the way that's going to happen often is you use an expensive bleach like White King or something, and you put too much in. So the cheap bleaches, like the supermarket brands, Coles, Woolworths brand, there's no detergents in it. It doesn't really suds up. The more expensive ones do. And if you get too foamy in there, and the same thing happens if you put way too much detergent, it gets too foamy, it messes up the washing machine's measuring system, and this applies to all front loaders. Gets too foamy, and the washing machine's like, right, I've got no water. It'll just start filling. It'll start spewing out of there. This is probably the worst one that can happen, because in the center you've got the washing machine bearings. You put them underwater, you've really introduced a high risk, especially if you've got bleach in the machine, that you've just destroyed your bearings. That's not going to show up for maybe weeks, months, but the washing machine will progressively get louder. Look, 50% of the time you'll get away with it, 50% of the time you won't. But you put those bearings underwater, and it seems a bit of it doesn't make a lot of design sense to me that there isn't something to stop that issue, but there's not, and there's not on every washer. But once that water goes above that center line or like just below it, 50% of the time you've wrecked your bearings. And that is game over for the washing machine most of the time. We do occasionally repair bearings, but it's not typically worthwhile. Like, it's expensive, and it's not always a guaranteed fix either. It's expensive. It's 3-4 hours of work on a good day, and you need a lot of specialized tools. Most washing machine repair people aren't going to do it. Don't think you can handle it as it's just a normal person off the street. You can do most washing machine jobs, but you don't touch that. Okay, so your major leaks. What have we covered? We've covered the leaking down there very badly. We've covered the coin going through. We've covered the overflow. Really, there's not a lot of reasons we can flood up other than that. I have once seen the washing machine, the cold water valve just stuck on. Even when the machine was off, it was insane. But it just kept filling and filling and filling. Turned the machine off at the wall, still filling. And it overflowed everywhere and made a tremendous mess. I've seen it once, never seen it again. But yeah, look, there's other rare things that can happen. But really, the way you're going to get a flood is probably hole through the drum. No, there's another way. Actually, this is the most common way you get a flood. So especially on the older Fisher Paykels, sometimes if you've got a pretty off-balance load, like you've got a towel and then a whole bunch of underwear, the towel is going to sit as this heavy weight, and then when it tries to spin, it will often spin off. It's hard to imagine, but there's a hook on either side of the top and then a shock absorber either side at the bottom. So what happens is that towel goes in and it has enough to lift it off its hook, and then this drops down, and then there's a little pipe in here that hooks up to the water measurement system up at the top, and that pulls off. And when the pipe pulls off the water measurement system, and instead of working in the way you might hope it would, it then infinitely fills up. So it just thinks it's got no water, because the measuring system's saying, well, I'm not sensing anything. So it just fills and fills and fills, and then it overflows. And the way pretty much it stops is the washing machine ends up going, oh, I keep trying to fill up, but I'm not sensing any water. The fault you'll get up here will be no tap. It'll think you haven't turned the water on, but what's actually happened is it's not sensing the water properly or at all. So the way you'll be able to see that like this problem is clear as day. See how that's perfectly lined up. Perfectly lined up, perfectly centered. What happens when the whole thing drops, other than the washing machine now has no suspension, so it'll be rocking and rolling around everywhere. The seal will be like all crinkled and distorted, and this will be like down because it's dropped. It sits down a bit and it won't be lined up. And that's how you see that. And it's actually a really easy fix. You just have to open the top, grab the hook. When I say an easy fix, easy in theory, there's a bit of actual skill to putting the hook back in its little spot without losing fingers. And then you just put the little pipe back on your water measuring system and you check for other damage. Usually you want to open the bottom, check the shocks, check it hasn't come off any shock absorbers or anything. But relatively easy to fix in theory. So that's the main one for a big flood. Main one, then extremely rare that I've only seen once. Water valve gets stuck on forever, even when the power's off. And what was the coin going through the basket? They're the big ones. Now, what I'll say is a lot of people, so in my situation, a lot of people aren't going to have the strength to lift that heat pump dryer off, and I barely do. So if there's a big issue and you can't access your water taps that are behind the machine, or even the power, you just know where your mains water is. So many people don't know how to shut down their mains water, and if you know how to shut down your mains water, everyone should know where their mains water is. And you should anyway, just so that when you go away, you can turn your water off, because you've got the flexible washing machine hoses under your sink. You're going to see braided steel hoses. By your toilet, there's braided steel toilets. And it's some crazy percentage of flood damage is caused by one of those hoses breaking. So know where your mains water is. Okay, so there's one last thing that can cause a washing machine to flood, and it is if your drain pump is faulty or blocked up. And in that case, you want to take this out, you unscrew it, okay, that way. Unscrew it, pull it out. Sometimes, because the water enters from this angle, things like if you've got a big, what's called a stick goes in like that, it jams it. So we don't really recommend opening this unless you actually have to, because what can happen is you unscrew it a bit, and then you pull it a little bit, and this can actually pull off the actual filter if you pull too hard. And so you end up in a situation where it's stuck half in and half out. Really, we get a screwdriver in there and we just force them out. But that can break the filter, and you have to replace the filter when that happens. That's just part and parcel. Now, so it can either be blocked or the drain pump can be bad. Particularly on the Fisher Paykels at the back, when you look in when this is removed, there's a little propeller things, particularly the little metal, I've forgotten the word, I think it's aglet. It's aglet. The metal aglets that you have on your pants, at the end of the string, the end of a shoelace, that little hard bit. They've started making them out of metal, and that loves to get caught, and you can't even see it, but it jams up the propeller at the back. You see that a fair bit actually. But anything can get caught there. Hair tie can get wrapped around the shaft on the pump. Band-aids can get caught in there, and this often fills up with coins. So it can be blocked or it can be a bad pump. But if you've got either, what will happen is the machine usually works it out that it's not draining properly, and we'll go, no, I'm gonna stop. Sometimes though, it'll just keep going, doesn't stop, and it comes out through the soap drawer, resulting in a flood. But usually, like, it's on a bad flood, it does tend to stop itself. In these circumstances, it goes, I'm not draining, this isn't working out. But when it stops, does it stop when the water's here or here or here, or after it's been flooding for 10 minutes? That's kind of the fun game of it. Yeah, check for blockages. The only real way to tell if your pump's bad is you pull this out, you check for blockages, you make sure that there's nothing there, as much as you can, nothing's wrapped around the propeller at the back. You really want to check it thoroughly. If there is an aglet jammed in at the back, you're probably not going to see it. And like to get rid of that, you have to actually open it. And if you're opening it at the back to pull the pump off, you're just going to replace the pump at that point. But the pumps, when they're on the way out, they tend to, it's an intermittent thing. Like sometimes it drains, sometimes it doesn't. But they also kind of perform the same way when something's just kind of a little bit jammed in there, and sometimes it jams it, sometimes it doesn't. So all you can do really is your best and clean that out and make sure it's good.